It's time to talk about my latest trip to Walt Disney World, which was this past weekend. You're listening to the Tomorrow Society podcast. Thanks so much for joining me here on episode 37 of the Tomorrow Society podcast. I am your host, Dan Heaton, and I'm here today to give you the trip report from my family's recent trip to Walt Disney World. It was over Martin Luther King weekend. We stayed 4 nights at the Animal Kingdom Lodge and went to the park on 3 days. We did our days at the Animal Kingdom and then at Epcot and then concluded with the Magic Kingdom. This was the 3rd time that we have stayed at the Animal Kingdom Lodge. We stayed there in March of last year, 2017, and then we stayed over Martin Luther King weekend in 2016. So this is a very similar trip to what we did that time when we also stayed 4 nights, flew in, took Disney's Magical Express, and used the bus system to get to the park for 3 days. That time, we actually went to the Magic Kingdom 2 days and Epcot 1, but this time we wanted to see the Animal Kingdom given that Pandora was there and that we had had such a good time at the Animal Kingdom back in March. Now, I did do a preview of this trip on episode 32, where I went into my thoughts for each day and FastPass selections, and I also talked about some lessons learned from previous trips that I hope to incorporate into this trip. So what I'm going to do a bit later is go through those lessons and talk about whether I actually learned them and incorporated them into this trip, and how everything went at the resort, using transportation at Disney, and of course each day and what we were able to accomplish at that time. And what I did when we were at Disney World is I took my little trusty mini recorder and recorded some trip reports each day. Basically at night, at the end of the day, I talked about what we'd done that day and my kind of initial thoughts on how the day went, what we did, and what worked for us. I'm going to play all of those in succession. They're all pretty short clips, but that gives kind of a nice idea of what I was feeling when we were on the trip. So I'll play all those in a row, and then I will come back afterwards to summarize the trip and fill in some of the gaps, and of course talk about how I think the trip went overall. So stay tuned for all of that, but first, here is my Disney trip report. Okay, well, I am sitting here on the porch of the Animal Kingdom Lodge in our room. We have arrived. It is day 1 of our Disney World trip, and it's been a long day, but everything went really smoothly. We flew out of St. Louis in the afternoon, arrived in Orlando at about 7 o'clock, went over to take Disney's Magical Express, and as you know, that does take a little bit of time, but it all went pretty well. We got on the bus about 8 o'clock. Bus took off at 8:15. We got to the resort at the Animal Kingdom Lodge about 8:55. So all things considered, I think Magical Express was a success. Our bags arrived about 10:25, so a little over 3 hours from when our flight landed, but only about an hour and a half from when we arrived at the resort, which given the time we arrived, I think was pretty good. Our room is a standard room, 4328. However, it does have a pretty cool view of animals. We've already seen some zebras. We're on the Kudu Trail. It's one of those standard rooms where you do have kind of the people pens that you can see from the room. We're in the corner. You're able to also see the animals because you're just on the side of the savannah. It's a little further away, but it's a really cool view. The only downside of this is it's a long walk to the lobby. It's not insane, but we're on the 4th floor, so you have to go down a floor, and then maybe it's about a 5-minute walk or so to the lobby, which isn't a huge deal, but if you're looking to grab food from the Mara or something like that, it takes a bit longer, but given the price difference from a standard room to a Savannah room, I think this was totally worth it. It's a really nice room, and having that view without paying the price, I think is totally worth it. So, and I have to make a pitch for the touring plans room request fax tool because it again worked out great for us. I requested 3316. We ended up about a floor above, but in a very similar area. So I think that worked out really well. And tomorrow we're going to Disney's Animal Kingdom, which makes sense, given how close we are. We're going to see Pandora for the first time, and I'm really excited about it. There is a chance of rain, so that could throw a wrench in our plans in the afternoon. But we're going to see as much as we can. Now I just need to get some sleep so we can go do that. But glad to be at the room and looking forward to hitting the parks. Hey there, this is night number 2, the first park day. I'm sitting out here on an overlook looking out into the Savannah, and it's really nice. It's a gorgeous night here at the Animal Kingdom Lodge. So today we went to Disney's Animal Kingdom. First time seeing Pandora. We got there about 10 and went right basically to Pandora and walked around and rode Navi River Journey. And I was really impressed. I think that land is so detailed beyond anything they had to do with putting it together. I mean, it doesn't even matter if you've seen Avatar at all. And I know that sounds like marketing speak or like just kind of being too forgiving, but it's totally true. You walk around and it's stunning. I never once thought that's that from the movie, except for maybe the tall kind of mechanical soldier that stands up near Satuli Canteen. It was super cool. Navi River Journey, I enjoyed a lot. You know, I know it's pretty short and there's not any type of big climax to it. I mean, you do meet up with the giant Navi animatronic, which is bigger and cooler than I thought. And how I would describe it is almost just like taking a boat ride through kind of a similar world to Rivers of Light or even Pandora at night. It's a fun ride. I really wish I could ride it more, like the lines weren't so long, or even that it was a few minutes longer. However, I thought it was great fun. I mean, the projection effects work really well. The animatronic is cool, and it just creates a nice atmosphere. It's okay they don't really have a story. It's a similar thing to Rivers of Light, where it creates the right vibe and works really well as a complimentary attraction. Now, we did use a fast pass, so if you'd waited an hour and a half for that, I don't know, it's kind of diminishing returns regardless. Same for Flight of Passage with the 4-hour wait, which I did walk past the line, which almost led all the way to Harambe. We did not get to go on Flight of Passage. I just didn't, going with my one daughter is too young to ride, and my wife gets motion sickness, and I just didn't want to start off the trip by us splitting up. I think that was the right move. I mean, I hear it's a great attraction, but it was that or get a fast pass for that and split up. It would have been something more complicated. The fast passes were only at night. So after we went to Pandora, we headed over and we spent a lot of the day doing the Wilderness Explorers game. And for parents with kids that are interested in animals or just like to do kind of scavenger hunts or fun things, it can really add to the park. We did this last time I went, and we finished the books this time. So we spent time in areas I don't go too much. Like we went to Rafiki's Planet Watch, went inside there. The kids met Doc McStuffins with no line, so they enjoyed that a lot. But just getting to go into that area, which I probably wouldn't have gone back to, you take the train and go experience that whole area, and they get their badges. We spent a lot of time today kind of focused on that. Walk through the Jungle Trek in Asia and the Gorilla Falls Trail in Africa, and really interacted with a lot of cast members. And all the cast members were just great. They were engaged with my daughters and gave them some good information, and it was just fun to do. that made the park kind of click for us a lot more than doing the attractions. It's crazy that we didn't even end up doing Expedition Everest, which I typically do every time, or Dinosaur. We did do the safari and saw more animals than I can ever remember seeing. Like, basically, this is the case where you have lions just posing for you on rocks. I think we saw everything except for maybe the hippos, and most of them were out and about. And it's interesting because this was at about 1 p.m., which isn't considered a great time to see animals. It wasn't really early in the day. So it was really surprising how many animals there were, especially there was a big downpour during our trip on the safari. So that was one of the better safari trips I've taken so far. We also did go to Dino Land. I got to go to the Boneyard for the first time ever, which is a well put together playground. It's a little much when, with a lot of screaming kids and such. We rode Triceratops Spin, which was not super exciting, but my kids enjoyed that. And ended up eating at Flame Tree Barbecue. I used the mobile order, which worked out really well. It saved us a lot of headaches. The lines were pretty long. It was at about 1:30, and I was able to order on the phone, walk up and grab it, and then go down and sit in the open area. It wasn't super crowded today. I think it was kind of in the middle. And then the evening, we went and we saw Rivers of Light, which still was very cool. I can see what people say about it in terms of how it ends, but I like the atmosphere and what it creates. It did rain for a little bit, which combined with the mist and the wind made us get pretty well wet during it, but I still think that show works well. But the final thing that was really cool is after that, we kind of moseyed down near the water on the Asia side and saw the Tree of Life Awakenings, more of it, and that is spectacular. It's one of the neatest things I've seen, especially at the Animal Kingdom. And the way that the projections of the animals then kind of morph back into the physical sculptured animals is something to see. I was stunned by it. And then we went to Pandora at night, which was also incredible. And I know I've been using that a lot, but the Animal Kingdom as a park doesn't have tons of attractions, but really clicks at night. I love the way that they keep Pandora so dark, and the Tree of Life Awakenings is another hit. So the park is really coming together. I think Pandora is a great step in the right direction. They just need to do a little bit more. Maybe add another attraction or two, but we had plenty to do for the whole day. My daughter also met Mickey and Minnie at the Adventurers Outpost, and we ate a quick dinner at the Yak and Yeti quick service. But in general, we had a lot to do, tons of walking, but it wasn't super hot in January, so it ended up working out great. So tomorrow we're going to Epcot, and assuming we have any energy left, hopefully it'll be a fun time. All right, well, I am here on our third night, sitting back on my porch. There are some zebras outside. There was a strange animal call, which I think may have been a way to draw the animals over here. I'm not sure. We are enjoying the day. It's quite cold out. It's actually in the high 40s right now. And I was the dummy who decided I would wear shorts to Epcot today because it felt a little warmer in the morning. And that was silly because it was very windy, but we had a good time. We did not get there super early after a long day at the Animal Kingdom yesterday. Got in about a little before 11 and started out with Spaceship Earth and did some of the Future World attractions like Imagination, Living with the Land, and all of that. But took it pretty easy for the most part today, but still had a good time. Today was the first day of Epcot's International Festival of the Arts. We got to experience a little bit of that. The thing with the festivals, especially when you're going with a family, is that while it all sounds amazing, you don't really get as much of a chance, like things like with the food kiosks and all that, to really do as much as you think. And that's not what I mean as a terrible thing. They still had a lot of fun. I don't have a great gauge on how cool it was. It was neat. They did do some of the pictures you could take inside a photograph, also pictures with the living statues. We went in the festival center, which had the exhibit on attraction posters from over the years and around the country, which was pretty cool, though that festival center at the Odyssey restaurant was kind of crazy. But it was fun to be in there since I usually don't get a chance to go in there. So we were able to do some things like that and see some of the extra art exhibits and things people were selling around World Showcase. But World Showcase on a Saturday, especially for the first day over a holiday weekend, it's pretty crazy. It got better as the day went on, mainly because it was cold. One of the big things we finally did was Frozen Ever After, which we tried to do last year in the spring, and it was closed. And actually this time we were getting set to go and it was closed, and then we tried to go back when it had reopened, it was closed again. Finally, we're able, because my Disney experience gives you then a fast pass to use anytime, we were able to come back and do it. It was quite a long fast pass line, probably took 20 minutes because so many people had the same thing. But we did it. And, kind of my thoughts on it, I think obviously having ridden Maelstrom, you're kind of going to compare that. And the bare bones of the attraction still work. The two hills back and forward, the scene with Let It Go and Elsa is really cool. All the animatronics worked well, so that was nice. I think it's a solid attraction. My girls really liked it. I think they could do better with the physical sets and have a little more to it, even if they were using that same space. And the mechanical issues are the thing that I think they really need to figure out, because it's really disruptive for people to keep having to come back, especially for one of your park's, flagship attractions because of how popular Frozen is, to now coming a year and a half from when it opened to still have so many issues. That's a big problem, and it can disrupt days. It definitely made us do a lot more backtracking. Whereas after all that was done, we had less interest in kind of doing as much in World Showcase. We did go to all the countries, or at least go around the lagoon, but didn't spend as much time with World Showcase as we might have if we hadn't gone through kind of that saga. I did want to mention, too, the Coco small exhibit of Dia de los Muertos in the Mexico Pavilion. That was pretty cool. There's several neat things with Coco with kind of some pretty basic effects that work really well right when you walk into the Mexico Pavilion. So I think that turned out well. Another thing that we were able to do is get a extra rolling fast pass for Test Track in the evening, because my daughter, that was the thing she wanted to do the most, but I know they wanted to see Frozen. So I got at the app, and I didn't do that much refreshing. I tried it a few times over maybe a few minutes and was able to get it for the evening. And that was really cool because I was able to ride with both of my daughters, my youngest for the first time, and ride it at night. So that was a success there. And Soarin' was also available. So I think we could have done either or, and if we had really, really pushed, we might have had a chance to do Soarin' later. So that was something cool we were able to do at night. We stayed till about 7:30, not through illuminations, but the park did start to clear out a bit, but the lines were still pretty long overall. So we had a really good day, but just kind of, especially in World Showcase, you just got a lot of people, especially a lot of international visitors and tour groups, which come in January. So that is going to have an impact kind of on how I visit the park. It turned out well for the most part. We hit the things we wanted to do the most and enjoyed some of the Festival of the Arts, which I would definitely recommend checking out if you get a chance, especially if you're able to really take it slow and experience a lot of what exists kind of around World Showcase. And there's also the Broadway performers. We saw a little of that, and that looked to be really well done. So the park was pretty lively, especially for a pretty cold January day. So we're going to finish up our trip tomorrow with the Magic Kingdom, and it's going to be chilly again, but maybe that'll keep the crowds down a bit. But I expect the Sunday before Martin Luther King Day is going to be pretty crowded. Hello there. I am actually back in St. Louis here, recording this on the night of Martin Luther King Day, the 15th. I had planned to record something last night after we went to the Magic Kingdom yesterday, but we were there pretty late and I was very tired, so we weren't there. It was open from 8 a.m. till midnight to give you a gauge of the crowds Disney expected and got yesterday. But we were there till about 9:40 or so, and that was a pretty long day. So I wasn't able to record it, and then today was a travel day, so I figured I would check in now and kind of give the basic gist of how things went yesterday and how the travel was, rather than waiting until I'm able to kind of organize my thoughts into the full podcast. So yesterday we went to the Magic Kingdom, and it was in the 60s and sunny. Sunday of a holiday weekend. This is the busiest day of the weekend because a lot of people might be traveling on Monday. And Friday and Saturday weren't that bad. So I knew we were kind of in for it, especially when I pulled up the app at about 9:30 or so and saw just kind of super crazy waits already before we even got to the park. So you knew we were kind of set up, and then our plan was to go to Tomorrowland first, and I was going to take my older daughter on Space Mountain while my wife and younger daughter just did Buzz Lightyear since it's right there, and Space Mountain was closed. So immediately we were making kind of a shift, and we did get to ride Space Mountain later in the day using kind of the Anytime Fast Pass, though it was closed for a good 4 or 5 hours, I think, that morning. And when we went to it later that evening, and there was a huge line at the Fast Pass thing around 6 o'clock or so. I took a picture of it and actually put it up on Twitter because I had never seen anything like it. I mean, you see long Fast Pass lines a lot. We had actually seen it the day before with Frozen, where it had been closed for a while, and then we waited maybe 20 minutes. This time we waited about 30. It didn't take that long to get inside, but then we went through the whole line, and the standby line said 155 minutes, so that was a really interesting thing. So the funny thing is my wife and younger daughter did Buzz Lightyear, and we went and did Monsters, Inc. Laugh Floor, which I had not done since 2008, I believe. And my daughter actually thought that was very funny. I think the humor of that and some of the jokes and the that guy stuff really hits an 8-year-old pretty well. And she got a lot of the jokes and thought it was funny and knew nothing about it because we hadn't even taken her or even talked that much about it in the past. So that was an interesting way to start the day. We did other things like Seven Dwarfs Mine Train and Peter Pan, but there were just a lot of people there. I had to do some serious refreshing of the app just to get a Small World Fast Pass after we used our 3 around 1 o'clock, and I was able to do that. And then we did lunch at Liberty Tree Tavern, and I will write a longer review of this experience, and I thought it was pretty good. You know, when you're going there with kids and they don't really want to eat, I wouldn't say it was my favorite experience I've ever had, but just looking at the atmosphere and the food, I think it was solid. You know, we tried out the pot roast, I had pasta, and we did not go for the all-you-can-eat option for lunch. It's kind of a cool place. It seems like a little bit like Columbia Harbor House in a way nearby that really transports you to like the 70s of the Magic Kingdom. And a lot of the rest of the day just spent kind of using the app. I mean, I was able to finally get a Haunted Mansion Fast Pass. We actually came out of the restaurant right when the Festival of Fantasy Parade was starting, which in one sense was good because we watched the parade, which is a cool parade. But then afterwards, you're kind of stuck where you're like, we don't really want to just go walk in this crowd. We want to stay behind. So I did get a Haunted Mansion Fast Pass. We waited for a little while and then went ahead and did that. And then shifted over, and we never even went into Frontierland, basically. At least over by Big Thunder. Splash Mountain was closed. We ended up going back to Storybook Circus, which was a little less crazy. But Dumbo had like 70-minute waits and stuff, which is just really high. But we used a Fast Pass for that too. Saw Goofy and Donald in Pete's Silly Sideshow, hung out in that area for a while and had a lot of fun over there. Then went over to Tomorrowland, and Tomorrowland at night is still great. We did the People Mover. They let us ride it twice in a row, despite the fact that the People Mover had a line that took like more than 10 minutes, which is crazy. Did Buzz Lightyear again. Just had fun at Tomorrowland. They had a dance party going on. It was just a really vibrant atmosphere, and I think part of that is that it was so crowded, but it never felt that crazy over there. And then the fireworks were starting, and we kind of had that decision where, okay, we're pretty tired. Do we want to leave? No, not really. It's our last night. Okay, we don't really want to watch the fireworks. My youngest daughter does not like the sound, and we didn't want to get stuck in that crowd because the crowds on Main Street were crazy. So we decided, okay, we're going to cut across the crowds. We had about 15 minutes. We're standing like at the People Mover at 7:45, cut across the entire crowds, barely got through, decided, let's go do the Tiki Room. And there was like 10 other people in there, which was amazing. Came out and it was still going on, and I realized Pirates is not going to have any wait at all. Everybody's watching the fireworks. So we did that. We walked right on, which this day was rare. And then did Jungle Cruise. People started to come back, but a nighttime Jungle Cruise, which was awesome,
just because I don't think I've ever really done it at night. And it seems a lot more eerie. I mean, the jokes are the jokes, but it was cool. It changes that ride so much to do it in pitch black dark, especially when it was kind of cold out. So that's kind of how we finished. We hung out in the shops a little bit, and by the time we got on the bus, it wasn't too bad. So we had a good day. And then today I took Magical Express, which worked out really well once again. We stopped at a few other resorts, but we were at the airport in plenty of time. Got on the plane and came back in Missouri, where it's really cold, even a lot colder than Orlando. I'll talk more about my summary of the trip when I have time to think about it a bit and not be so exhausted. The Magic Kingdom day was probably the most crowded I've ever been there, at least that I can remember as an adult. But in general, we were able, through Fast Pass and a lot of refreshing on the app, and then through what we did during the fireworks, we were able to see a lot and have a good time. So the trip overall was great. It was exhausting, but also fun to kind of do a quick 3-day, 4-night trip, and had a lot of fun at the resort too. So I found those shorter trips to be more satisfying lately than the longer ones, and trip worked out well.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed hearing a bit about what I was thinking when we were at Disney World. I wanted to talk a bit more about the Animal Kingdom Lodge and our experiences there. I seem to like that resort more every time I stay. I mentioned on the clip about that we were in room 4328 and how well that worked out. It's hard for me to recommend that you fork over the money for the Savannah rooms. I mean, you look at like our room, which was like $260 or so after discounts. Savannah room's over $400. That's quite a difference to pay. And if you start to get up higher to things like the club level and villas and all that, it gets really expensive. But I don't want that to discourage you immediately from staying at the Animal Kingdom Lodge, because you can get a decent deal, especially when Disney is offering discounts. So you have this gorgeous resort with solid rooms. It's kind of on the lower end of deluxe in terms of size, but there's a lot of cool amenities. There's things you can do at the resort, including night vision goggles that you can view the animals directly at that point from your room or even from an overlook. They also have a lot of cultural programs. And for me, the biggest benefit beyond the theming and everything is the Mara, which is the counter service restaurant. And over our whole trip, we ate there a lot of times, every day for breakfast. I had initially planned to go to Sanaa for breakfast on the last day, but we were pretty worn out, so we ended up just going to the Mara. And I picked up breakfast or dinners there multiple times. I think we only went there as a family one time the first night, but it was really easy to be able to go pick up food, especially with the younger kids, and eat in the room. Like at the parks, I think we only had one day where we actually had dinner in the parks. There was some sort of snack or dessert or ice cream. So we would then go back to the resort, and depending on how hungry we were, you could easily go and pick up, a sandwich or pizza or salad of high quality food. And that makes the trip so much easier. And that's what I wonder when I think about a resort like the Contemporary, which has the benefit of being close to the Magic Kingdom. And if I was going to go to the Magic Kingdom multiple days, which we've done before, I can totally see the benefit of being able to walk there. The bus ride from the Animal Kingdom Lodge is about 20 minutes. However, the Contempo Cafe is not on the same level as the Mara. So in a lot of cases, we've gotten so used to using that. I know Roaring Fork at Wilderness Lodge is a little smaller, but it's a very similar venue. We've taken great advantage of that. We're not staying in a villa, so we're not going to be having all this food in our room. So I cannot underestimate the benefit of the Mara, but also that the food is good. It's solid food. It's not super expensive. I mean, it's Disney prices, so you're still spending $4 for an orange juice and things. But overall, the entrees are in the, $9, $10, $11, $12 range for foods that aren't always just your most basic thing. And you can also pick up some unique items like zebra domes, for example, which are also at Boma, you can get at the Mara. They have beer and wine and other side desserts that are very good, like the zebra cupcake too. You can pick them all up there. So I promise they're not giving me any money for this endorsement, but that is something that makes it hard to think, especially given the price per room. If we're going to stay at the deluxe level, it's hard to think about trying to stay somewhere else, given especially that some of those other places are twice as much or more. So the Animal Kingdom Lodge worked out great for us. I found myself just kind of wandering the resort and taking little pictures of details and just hanging out there. I just love hanging out there. And it's not a resort for everyone. It is a little further away. The ride to the Magic Kingdom on the bus was about 20 minutes. The ride to Epcot was 15. Obviously, if you're going to see Pandora, the ride to the Animal Kingdom is about 2 minutes, it seems like. Maybe a little more to get out of the actual parking lot, but it's very short. So there are real benefits to staying there, especially given the improvements to the Animal Kingdom. I also raved quite a bit about Pandora during my trip report that night. And I even want to expand on that a bit more because I feel like it's kind of amazing that Disney succeeded with this land. You have a movie that at the time when they initially announced it was still only just a few years old. It drew a lot of head scratching then, but even more so by 2017 when we had the movie that came out 8 years earlier that a lot of people either hadn't seen or had seen in the movie theaters like me and barely remembered. And it's pretty cool that they were able to, I almost think of Pandora as being inspired by Avatar rather than trying to recreate anything from it. Yes, there are the Na'vi people and you can fly on a Banshee and Flight of Passage. There's a lot of things from the movie that are in there, and I suspect I would notice even a lot more touches if I watched the movie again. But going in as someone, my wife had not seen the movie and still was very impressed by the details of it, just how much time and effort from the ground to obviously the floating islands above, all the fake wildlife that was in there and the plants along with real plants. It's something to see, and it even expands more at night. I feel like this is a case where Disney did more than they probably had to do. Like the benefits commercially, they haven't had a huge uptick in attendance there due to Pandora, which I'm sure they're disappointed by. It didn't really move the needle much last summer in terms of hotel occupancy from what I've heard. So is it a success? I would say it's a creative success, the land itself. That's really important because there is guest satisfaction to take into consideration. More people may not be coming to the parks. I'm sure it's got a bit of an uptick, but it's going to be consistently enjoyed. Some people like me and many others have not seen it yet, but may go to the Animal Kingdom to see it. If they can find a way to add a few more attractions, or even in Pandora or somewhere else, it's only going to get more popular. Now, the one issue I will say is they really messed up with capacity. I'm sure Disney was aware of the fact that they were going to have that issue. These both attractions do not hold a ton of people, and especially Flight of Passage, which sometimes has issues where one theater will go down, can really lose capacity. And when I was there, it was considered a Touring Plans Day 7 out of 10 on the Crown calendar. It didn't even feel that bad. I was a little surprised. I would have guessed it'd be more like a 5, though I know the difference between 5 and 7 is very small. But to go to that land, and you have the Na'vi River Journey, which is about a 4-minute boat ride, which I liked much better than I expected. I think because my expectations were pretty low based on what I'd heard. But it's gorgeous. It just has a really nice atmosphere. However, we used a fast pass. If you're going to do that through standby, the waits were typically about 90 minutes all day. They may have gone down to about 60 in the evening, but they were still pretty high when we walked by there an hour before park closing. So it's basically a case where you need to go right away, use a fast pass, or wait a long time. And Flight of Passage was much more. Obviously, that is the highlight for most people, and I want to experience it. But on this short family trip, it just didn't work out. But the lines were typically around 240 minutes the whole day. I think I saw it was at 190 when we went by that evening. And what's so crazy is seeing you have the line inside, and then you have the outdoor line, and then they have this overflow line where basically On the path heading towards Harambe, we walked by a huge mass of people that weren't even in Pandora yet, that were just waiting for Flight of Passage. Now, I hope, though, that people that were at the back of that line, almost in Harambe, love the attraction. But it's not a good look for Disney, especially on a day that's not that busy. People are going, and they're going to wait 3-4 hours, and they may love it, and they may say it was worth every minute, but not everyone is going to say that. I feel like, given Disney knew this was going to be a popular attraction, there's only so much they can do right now. I don't know if they have the ability to like Soarin' or, to add an extra theater. By messing with the capacity, you have a land that is so well done and I haven't ridden Flight of Passage, but two likely great attractions. But because of the capacity issues, those are always going to hang over it. Some people will never experience them, especially a guest who hasn't planned in advance. And people that do, there's always going to be that, it was great, but I waited this long. Or it would have been good if I didn't wait an hour and a half, like Navi River Journey. That is the only real hiccup I could see with Pandora. And I'm concerned that it's going to be even worse with Star Wars, which is so much more popular. From what I've heard, these aren't going to be huge capacity attractions. They're not going to be Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey or Pirates of the Caribbean type attractions in terms of capacity. So they're going to have a real issue. And I don't know. I think Disney may be okay with it. They may be okay with that demand being so high. But it's not a great look from an operations perspective, despite the land being as amazing as it is. On a similar note, like I mentioned on the clip, Frozen Ever After, while its lines have become much more manageable, they're typically, when I was there, on again, a touring plans, day 7, they were about 70, 80 minutes, sometimes even lower. But they had a lot of issues with it being closed. And World Showcase is not that easy to get around. They got to find a way to make that better. I actually think, though, the mechanical issues or even the lines will probably be a moot point in a few years, because you have Ratatouille coming in France. You have Guardians of the Galaxy coming in Future World. Those are both likely going to be big hits. And like we've seen a bit with Soarin' and to a bit of a lesser extent with Test Track, the lines will go down when you add in more high-level e-ticket attractions. Now, my overall thoughts about Epcot is it's doing good. The Festival of the Arts, I hate to say it, does add a lot of life to that area. It's not even as much about what the benefits are. If you are not going to have a bunch of new attractions that draw people, there needs to be another way to draw crowds. The general consensus among a lot of Disney fans seems to be that the festival is good, and I don't disagree. I think there's a lot of benefits to it, especially if you're a frequent visitor, either a local, an annual pass holder, or even someone like me that goes once a year or so. Having something like we've never seen this festival, having something there that is different is never a bad thing. Now, in terms of attractions, it's mainly the same things we do every time. We did do Frozen for the first time, but, we went to Epcot and we did Spaceship Earth and Living with the Land, and my daughters love Figment, so Imagination, Three Caballeros. You get the idea. Basically, Epcot still seems a bit stagnant in terms of attractions. This is not a mind-blowing thing that I'm saying. We had a good time. It was fun. I'm hopeful that the park, beyond the few e-tickets, things they're talking about that I'm excited about, the space restaurant, the new China movie, which I have heard nothing about since the initial announcement at D23. Hopefully some sort of improvements to the interventions area, or just removing them entirely. Some incremental moves like that are things that I'm really looking for at Epcot. It's been my favorite park for years, and I had a good time there, especially because people started to disappear when it got colder. Epcot is a park that is cold. I will tell you, when it is really windy, that area near Spaceship Earth, or even walking around the lagoon, that is not pleasant. However, there's still plenty to like. World Showcase is still as vibrant as ever. And one thing that I didn't mention on the clip is how much live entertainment that we really enjoyed as we were walking around. There was a really upbeat band playing in Canada that was fun. You had music just seeming to be performed everywhere. And that's where that park can really click, even when there aren't as many attractions. If there's a lot going on that way, which the festivals add to, and we even walked by for the Broadway performers were singing, and we only stood there for a few minutes. But when you have that type of atmosphere in World Showcase, you don't need that much else. Now, of course, that can cause Disney to get a little complacent. However, having been there just for one day for a quick trip, there was still more to do than we could possibly put into a day. We didn't even get to do Impressions de France. Plenty of World Showcase pavilions we barely saw. I don't want to get too down about Epcot, and I think that park is going to change a lot in the next few years. I'm still amazed thinking about at the Magic Kingdom how crowded it was on that day. And Touring Plans listed it as an 8 out of 10, which surprised me because I don't think I've ever been there for a 10 out of 10 day, but this felt closest. There were lines. We walked by Columbia Harbor House at about 1:45, and there was a massive line out the door and up the hill. And even more amazingly, we walked a little further, and there was a line probably with 100 people in it for the Liberty Square fruit stand. To me, that right there says two things. One, it was a very crowded day. The fact that people basically said, I don't want to wait in line for this restaurant. I'm going to go get some fruit instead. And that line became almost as long tells you a lot. Unless there was something going on at that fruit stand that I was not aware of, it amazes me. The second thing is the Magic Kingdom still has an issue. They need more places to eat. I'm not talking about fancy table service. Yes, it would be great if they had more table service. We need places that hold a lot of people. One, it would help to get more people off the paths, especially in some really busy areas. And two, people are going to stay longer. You're not going to have this crazy lunch rush on busy days. And you think about some of the restaurants in that thoroughfare from Liberty Square Fantasyland area. Columbia Harbor House and Pinocchio Village House. Both don't hold a crazy amount of people. Cosmic Rays does hold a lot, and Pecos Bill's is also fairly large. However, I feel like you need another restaurant. I don't know where it would be. Maybe you could find some way to put it back in the Storybook Circus area, or, expand out by Frontierland, over by Splash Mountain and Big Thunder. I'm kind of thinking off the cuff here, but they need to do something to get more people to have the ability to eat. And also, that would maybe bump up the quality just a little bit. Now, when we were there, like I mentioned earlier, we were at the Liberty Tree Tavern, which we got to experience our nice announcement of, the Heaton family from Missouri, which it's a fun little touch that I wasn't aware of, though I felt a little bad for the servers that have to do that and clap half-heartedly many, many, many times during the day. The Magic Kingdom does handle crowds better than some parks do. So I don't want to overemphasize what they need. There's still a ton of attractions. And as it went into the evening, the lines did start to drop. People start to filter out. So you can find your areas where there's fewer people. And we did just that. We had a great second half of that day. The first half of the day felt a little too cramped, even trying to get over to do the Fast Pass for Seven Dwarfs Mine Train and Peter Pan and that area. It's a lot to take, especially when you're on the third day of your trips in terms of the parks. Trying to navigate with a stroller through that crowd is not something I recommend. It's not a good look for a flagship park. Now, I've heard that Disneyland is even more difficult on busy days because obviously it's a lot smaller than the Magic Kingdom. I haven't been there on a super busy day. The good thing is they've got more things coming to the park that are going to change how crowds move through it. The big theater in the Main Street and obviously the Tron coaster will be coming in a few years. So the way I look at it now, where you have some of these areas that really get bottled up, the crowds are going to move a lot differently. Also, we were there when Splash Mountain was closed, so fewer people are going to be back all the way in that corner. So there are going to be some changes to how crowds move through the Magic Kingdom. What I can say is that Magic Kingdom continues to be the best place for using FastPass Plus. If you're going to the Magic Kingdom and not using the app or the kiosk a lot, you aren't doing it right. And I'm not trying to say you have to be an overplanner, constantly hitting the app. We used it once again to get a bunch of fast passes, and you could use it even more well into the evening. And on a really busy day at the Magic Kingdom, that is a necessity. So we finished out the trip really well there, had a great night. I love that park at night. All the parks really come to life at night. And the Magic Kingdom does in particular, because people tend to filter out or especially focus on the fireworks, which came to our benefit and allowed us to do quite a lot. So back on episode 32, I had gone through kind of 5 lessons learned that I was going to take into this trip. And I've already discussed a lot of them in previous parts of this podcast. The number 1 was don't drive to Florida. 2 was take Disney's Magical Express. So both of that kind of is really one thing where it involves we're going to fly, and we did nonstop flights both ways. Both ways worked fine. We took Magical Express, which takes a while, but wasn't bad. It was pretty easy. Everything went smooth there. The third one is book a standard view room, which I've gone into in quite a lot of details earlier in this podcast. So I really want to focus on the last 2 and how it worked with our trip. Number 4 was don't try rope dropping the parks. So we've learned over various trips that my family just does not get up in the morning and move quickly. I wouldn't say that I'm that way, but particularly our girls, they're okay waking up early, but trying to move them quickly and get them to the parks that early, especially on vacation, just doesn't seem like the right move. So on our 3 days, we arrived at the parks. I think we arrived at the Animal Kingdom at about 10:10. We arrived at Epcot at 10:40, and at the Magic Kingdom at about 11. So each day, it got a little bit later each time. Part of that is how long it takes to get to each park, but part of it is just how trips work. But we stayed until 7:30, 7:40. Our last day, we stayed at the Magic Kingdom until about 9:30. So if you're looking at how long we stayed at the parks, we were there for quite a long time, especially when you're talking about girls that are just shy of 9 and 5. You can only do so much, but when you're staying somewhere like the Animal Kingdom Lodge and park hours are not huge, you don't really want to come back to the resort to take a break. And like I mentioned earlier, our girls don't always move that quickly. That could also happen if we came back and took a break. I have a feeling we might not ever get back. I think the approach worked out well. Yes, we did not take full advantage, especially at the Magic Kingdom, of the 8 a.m. opening time. And that was not extra magic hour. That was when it opened. So by the time you get there a few hours later, the lines are longer than they might be normally. But we were still able to do plenty. And that really flows into the last lesson I had, which is don't try to do everything. And this really fits with my whole mentality of the trip. It wasn't just about, oh, we don't care if we do that. It's more about looking at priorities and saying, why are we doing this trip? Are we doing this trip in order to see every single thing we've ever done and try to conquer the parks? Or are we doing this to have a great time as a family and then do the things that we find most important? And I haven't always been great in the past about just chilling a little bit. I don't mean I'm like crazy and screaming and stuff, but you get a little nervous as a Disney fan, or you hear enough about planning and what you should do. Sometimes you get a little stressed trying to make sure you do everything, especially because I'm kind of the planner of the family. This is where I think it worked out great. Even when we're on the bus for Epcot and we know our Fast Pass expires in a little bit and we might not make it, I was cool with it because I know there's always a backup plan to everything. Worst case, if there's something you're going to do, you just don't do it. But you can always wait in line. You can always change the time on the app sometimes. You can adjust things, get extra fast passes. There's a lot of different ways to see the parks. And if you're flexible and laid back, things can work out. And that's something that, on the whole, my takeaway from this trip is that I was more chill and just enjoyed being there. Part of that might have been that we were there in March, which I know was 10 months ago, which isn't that frequent for Disney fans, but is more frequent than sometimes we go. And I really just enjoyed being in the parks, especially when you're in places like Pandora or watching Rivers of Light or just walking around World Showcase. There were times when I just was like, I can't believe we're here. This is amazing. And I've been to Disney World a lot of times, but we're on the People Mover and we ride it and we say, let's ride it again. And they let us do it and we ride it again. And it's nighttime and it's Tomorrowland. And I'm going, this is so cool that we're here. That's something you have to be careful not to lose when you go to the parks a lot and get a little too much into. We got to do all the new stuff. We got to see 25 attractions. We didn't really see that many attractions at the Animal Kingdom. I mean, if you don't count all the Wilderness Explorer stops, we did like 5 or 6 or something. But it was still a really fun day because there's so much just to see walking around, to see the animals, Tree of Life Awakenings. So my takeaway is, please, when you go to Disney World, try to do everything you can. Try to maximize your time, of course. Use Fast Pass effectively. But just appreciate being there. I know it might seem a little corny, but for me, that approach made this just a really satisfying trip and one of my favorites in a long time. Well, this podcast is just the start of some material about this trip on tomorrowsociety.com. I'm planning on doing day-by-day trip report blogs, which will include a lot of photos and go into even more detail about what we did on each day. I'll also have a review up of the Liberty Tree Tavern, my thoughts on Pandora, and maybe even a full post about Frozen Ever After. So stay tuned for all of that over at tomorrowsociety.com. You can also keep up with what I'm doing on Twitter at TomorrowSOC or Facebook or Instagram at Tomorrow Society. If you need to reach out to me, you can always contact me by email through dan@tomorrowsociety.com. The music for this podcast was composed by Adam Hookey and performed by the Sophisticated Babies. If you like what you hear on this podcast, reviews on Apple Podcasts, you can go right into the app and review it from there. It's never been easier, or through your other podcast providers are always appreciated and really help to get the word out about this show. Stay tuned for more interviews with a lot of cool guests coming up in the upcoming months. I'll talk to you again very soon.